Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. One rule, we appreciate vigorous debate, but let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on LinkedIn, get the word out to your friends, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, good evening from my side. My name is Lei, and I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters and the only tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. Pre-pandemic, I spent pretty much 20 years on the ground in China covering the industry. Since the pandemic, I've been in the US as an independent analyst consultant looking afar and still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. This is episode number 45. So a few hours after we logged off last Thursday evening, my time, Friday morning, your time, CAAM came out with the official November numbers. We'll talk a little bit about that. Niutron, 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 just announced its brand yesterday.
Is it Neutron or Niutron?
Niutron.
Niutron, okay.
And a surprise announcement from BAIC Group about
sneaky.
Yeah, sneaky. It's increased shareholding in Daimler. It's now the biggest shareholder, I guess, after stake increase.
I'm sure that's unsettling. I'm sure that's unsettling for some folks.
That they've been holding since 2019 when they announced the 5% stake. NIO Day is coming up tomorrow, your time, the day after tomorrow, my time. So we'll have a kind of a look into what might be announced. So let's start out with the numbers again quickly, just to recap. So basically, November, 450,000 units NEVs, 18% penetration rate. And that's going to end up with 2021 about 3.5 million units based on my projections and 13% plus penetration rate, okay, out of about 26.2-ish, 3-ish million. So 3.5 million.
And remember, January 1, 2020, the Chinese government's goal was 20% take rate by 2025. We're at 18 in November of 2021.
And CAAM just held a kind of their annual forecasting conference, and they predicted for this year, their projection is 3.4 million, which I think is low. So that's 150% growth over 2020. So 2020 was 1.37 million. So that's, 2.5x, right? And for 2022, their projection is 5 million units, a 47% increase based on the 3.4 million they predicted. And the auto market will be about 27.5 million. So if you do the math.
So chop it to 20%.
Yeah, well, just a little bit under 20%. And that's CAAM. I think they've always been a little bit conservative than I, but I mean the basic trend. We've already talked about this. We've beaten the horse to death. That the tipping point came this year, basically, right? From last year it was like 5%. This year to over 13%, and a little bit even more in the PV market.
I think 2022 will be the tipping point for the EU since there will be more products from China entering those markets. So I think one of the constraints that the EU has with their sales, which is increasing significantly. So don't get me wrong, but again, it's a dearth of products. As more products enter the market, more options, I think the sales might be at a tipping point in 2022 in Europe. So
Yeah, and here's someone else's perspective. I shared a tweet from BYD Chairman Wang Chuanfu, who was talking to some media KOLs at a special roundtable a couple of days ago, and he predicted the penetration to hit 25 to 27% for the full year 2022, and even 35% in December 2022, based on the current trends. And he's predicting 5.5 million for 2022. That's 500,000 higher than us, than CAAM, and also than Ouyang Minggao, which we talked about last episode.
And let's remember that Wang Chuanfu has a cheat sheet because he sees, the internal numbers from BYD, and so they're probably basing their production numbers off of what he'd kind of articulated to that group. So
right, so there's a couple of factors at play, I think, for BYD and the entire market. One is the seasonality of it. So December will be the last month which you will enjoy the current subsidy rates, which drops next year and completely gone by the end of next year.
Eliminated, yeah.
And the other one is, so Chery, another Chinese automaker, they just announced the sales target for next year. So they're going to sell 1 million vehicles, everything, including NEVs. And they want to strive to sell 2 million vehicles next year. Their target is 1.5. And, in Chinese, they always say that's our target, but we will strive for a higher number. And somebody replied to me and said, this might have been a kind of a spending power issue, that the reason that we're seeing this dumbbell effect, right? Mm-hmm. This lower, a lot of Chinese brands are benefiting from this.
Right.
And based on what Wang Chuanfu said about the Dolphin, right? I tweeted that, and his internal projection is 20,000 to 30,000 a month just for that model alone. And remember, they did 90,000 NEVs in November. So I'm going to say this, that BYD will be the first company or the brand to join the 100K club in December. I don't think there's any, I think it's going to happen.
We need to create a new banner and maybe get Wang Chuanfu on our pod.
Yeah.
So I will say,
that's sort of the state of the market.
I will say that currently the exchange rate is 6.37-ish to the US dollar, to $1. So $1 buys me 6.37 RMB. It's pretty strong. The Chinese government actually wants it to weaken.
Right. I think they're trying to stabilize that a bit, and rather than having the yuan to appreciate. Right?
So it makes imports cheaper for the Chinese consumer, but that means that the domestic side is not as competitive. But there's a lot of other things at play here. But for our intents and purposes, we're talking this bullishness really continuing well into 2022, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to be wrong. Go ahead.
Which is the last year of subsidies.
Yeah.
I mean, although it's now becoming a market-driven market, but it still plays an important role.
With the number of products by the end of 2022, those subsidies won't be necessary. I think there'll be a pretty good cap on prices due to the level of competition and the number of different products and the selections that the Chinese consumer will have here. Now, and the EU is still going to need subsidies. The United States, obviously, to get jump started from 600,000 to 1 million, 2 million units, 3 million units.
Right, they're like 5 years late. So.
Yeah.
And another phenomenon that we must mention is the 3.5 million units. By my estimation, roughly 10% of that is exported. So Tesla accounts for a big chunk of that, right? Remember?
Yeah.
So that we haven't seen in
Tesla
any of,
and MG, right, is a
AMG
disproportionate
and
number.
others,
Can you give us a little bit of background on Chery? Because in my history of Chery, they're known to be a very, very low end vehicle, low price, low end, low quality vehicle. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Chery, tomorrow, December 18th, they produced their first car on December 18th, 1999.
Wow.
And
Okay.
they will be celebrating their 25th anniversary next year. So they were founded in 1997. And over the years, they've gone through this multi-brand effort that failed, and now they're coming back with that again and trying to go high end. But one thing that they've stuck with is the so-called forward independent R&D, and it looks like they're finally reaping fruit.
Are they an SOE?
Yeah, they're locally state owned.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yep.
but anyways, that's the market. We've so if we look back this whole year, remember at the beginning of the year I said 2.5 million, and then we increased it to 2.8 million, then 3.3 million, now 3.5 million. It's just I think everybody underestimated, and like what Wang Chuanfu said, they've underestimated the demand, for that Dolphin alone. Not the numbers that I saw that they have 8 or 9 NEVs that sell more than 4,000 units a month, and then 2 that are selling like 20,000 to 30,000 a month. I was reading this somewhere, averaging, just mind-boggling.
And so what everyone is seeing, if Wang Chuanfu is articulating that publicly, most other automakers are also seeing huge increases, maybe not 47% on their internal forecast for 2022, but likely large increases in sales for their products. And with battery constraints, we know, you and I know, Lei, that there are still battery constraints for supply. What these automakers are going to need to do is put their money where their mouths are and write big checks to Gotion, to CATL, to Samsung, to all these
Volkswagen already did that.
Yeah. And so that's the only way they're going to secure this linear supply and become first, second, third in line. If they're waiting to see how the year kind of pans out before they start buying up extra capacity on the battery cell side, it'll be gone. So big checks right now are probably being written for Q1 and Q2 supply for batteries and chips. And it'll be lumpy for sure, right? Because what'll happen, and you know this, Lei, I'm predicting that January will have a lot of companies working overtime to build ahead for the 2-week or 2.5 week lull in Chinese New Year at the end of January, beginning of February. And then it always takes a few weeks to kind of get back online and up to speed. And then we'll see this huge acceleration, maybe leveling off over the summer and then taking off again starting in September, October. So,
yeah, looking ahead, I think 2022, the battery constraint probably will be a more of an issue than the chip constraints. So because the volumes they're really getting high, 5 million units, 5.5, some are saying 6 million. Almost doubling again. That's just
and
yeah.
this raises flags for quality, red flags, because if we're running at a certain run rate per week and we double it or we increase it by 50%, there's always this risk of quality issues. So where BYD is at a huge advantage with regards to their competitors is that they manufacture their own batteries. So they can really keep a tight ship with regards to the first part being put on a car all the way to it to it driving off the line at the end because everything is engineered in-house. So,
Yeah, remember? Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
BYD's got its own chips. Okay, it's got its own batteries. So we haven't seen BYD talk. Well, I mean, they, right? Mr. Wang, he says underestimated demand, so that they're still constrained in some way, even though
yes,
they do this themselves. So imagine if everybody else did this, what would have happened? We could have seen 4 million even this year.
Yeah, because remember the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents proper preparation prevents poor performance. So, but again, I don't think anybody would have predicted at the beginning of 2020 that we're going to get to 3.5 million units. Right? They predicted almost 100% more than the original prediction, which is it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, we added 1 million units since April. So,
and in a constrained setting, we're still hitting records. Led by a handful of companies. BYD is head and shoulders above everyone else in the China domestic market from the standpoint of actual sales volume and across a number of products, right? Because I would argue that Tesla, the Model Y, is very strong domestically, but maybe a little bit weaker is the Model 3 than they'd like to see in the domestic market. And I don't know. I think the ID series, I guess I haven't looked at those numbers very closely, but I think there's not a clear leader among the 3 or 4 cars that are being sold among the ID series. So,
and BYD has yet to launch their high-end premium brand.
Yeah.
Right. That's coming next year. So,
and there's just not a lot of competition in the premium sector besides Hi-Fi and Tesla, right? So,
and there's that brand coming, right?
Yes. We can't forget about that brand.
Yeah. It starts out with a B
and ends with a Lee.
So speaking of new brands, Niutron, I think too you are very familiar with Xiaoniu, right? I think you attended their events last year or the year. Was it last year?
I remember you. It was earlier this year. It feels like last year, but it was earlier this year.
Right. So
got a chance to sit down and talk to Yan Li, or the
which
CEO.
Is the new CEO after the former CEO went into jail.
Yinan, yeah. Because he was only the CEO for a short period of time.
He got taken away just literally a couple of days after they announced the NIO brand. I think that was a story. So for Niutron, this guy, this founder, this CEO, I mean, this guy's worth talking about. His background, his style, what he went through, much as the Niutron brand itself.
He's got a little Jia Yueting in him for sure, I think, right?
Yeah, and when he was 27, he became the CTO of Huawei. Think about that. 27. And he was known as the prodigal son or something like that in Chinese, son of the founder,
right?
And then he kind of got into
investments,
quarrel with Ren, and he left. And then I think he his over his career, he went to I think he went to GSR Ventures, right?
That's right. They have a VC and a private equity arm. And a good buddy of mine worked with him there. So after Huawei, he started out a company that kind of competed with Huawei, but then got bought out. Of course,
and he returned to Huawei, but he didn't stay long. And then he became the CTO of Baidu in 2008, I think. But that was short-lived. And then he went to these VCs like GSR, I think Plum Ventures, which also invested in Li Auto and Niutron.
And he wasn't in. He was in jail for not a short period of time. He was in jail for
roughly 2.5 years.
for insider trading, basically.
For insider trading, where his family members got some, inside.
So he actually has nothing to do with Xiaonyo except being the largest shareholder.
Right. Well, when Xiaonyo went public, he was like behind he didn't ring the bell, but as a founder, I think he was like standing behind.
Yeah. So this car or EV venture that he is working on and launched was one of the worst kept secrets in China. Everybody kind of knew. And that's why I think Yan Li, the CEO of Xiaonyo, was getting these questions from the media of whether or not Xiaonyo was going to enter the EV four-wheel passenger vehicle market. He's like, no. And a little bit of background on Yan, super smart guy, came from private equity, but is not the founder, right? So very, very, very good CEO, but not someone that created the company. And so Xiaonyo is doing very well, but they don't have anything to do with the electric vehicles. Yen said bluntly, the economics are completely different. Their market cap, Xiaonyo's market cap is around $2 billion. They don't have that type of capital to invest in R&D and to launch a passenger vehicle. So make no mistake, there's no association between Xiaonyo and Niutron.
Yeah, it's entirely Li Yinan's venture.
Although he might be using his NIO shares as capital for money for investment in the Niutron. So
right, so it's been kind of under the radar for 3 years. So this was started in 2018. So shortly after he came out of jail, and they bought this company Dorson in Chinese, 大成, which is like one of those very small companies on the fringe that had a plant in Changzhou. In Changzhou, I think Xiaonyo also has a plant in Changzhou, right?
Yeah, that's the plant I visited. It's brand new.
And Li Auto is in Changzhou. They're like 40 kilometers away from each other. And Niutron is doing a extended range SUV like the Li Auto 1. So Niutron is kind of like trying to become the next Li Auto or something.
Yeah, and they're going to compete against Jidu. They're going to compete against Jidu. They're going to compete against the Xiaomi brand.
So this Niutron NV is the first model. It will be an extended range, mid to large sized SUV,
around 300,000 RMB, right?
Yeah, they have this Gemini kind of dual architecture. One a BEV, the other the EREV.
Yep.
So we're getting all mixed up because NIO was probably having a Gemini project, right?
Yes.
And so they will have limited production in March and starting SOP in September 2022.
So we're gonna see what it looks like in April, I'm certain.
Oh yeah, before the Beijing Auto Show.
Yeah,
that's that. Niutron, and it's not the only new brand that are coming out, as we know.
And we should note that they've announced that they had raised $500 million USD for Niutron.
Yeah, and
so far
it's also worth mentioning the style of this guy Yinan. No nonsense, straight shooter. And what I heard from the media interview that he took was basically he answered, I don't know, to a lot of questions, or I don't want to share, or, we'll let you know later. Like very short, straight answers. There's no, that's his style. That's so.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
To me, that's a bit refreshing because.
But this guy's background is really, I think, legendary, even more so than Wenham Li or Li Xiang.
Yeah.
Just crazy. Yeah.
And just being in jail, right?
Yeah.
Because not a lot of these Chinese entrepreneurs, they have that. So maybe Jia Yueting if he came back to the China would.
Yeah,
But
2.5 years.
so,
Yeah.
oh man, that let's go over it. So Niutron, Jidu, IM, the SAIC, they're all kind of technology focused, technology derived EV brands that are going to be launching next year, right? One more. Who am I missing? I'm missing one more. But
Xiaomi.
Yeah, Xiaomi. That's right. So it'll be interesting to see if they can break out of the technology company creating an EV stereotype. If they can cross genres and sell to a broad audience, because the price points for most of these cars are going to be less than 350,000 RMB, right? So that's a million unit sector in China. So
Xiaomi and Baidu are pretty clear. So Xiaomi is betting on its brand and its ecosystem and its current kind of fans, whereas Jidu is betting on Baidu's autonomous driving functions, putting that car as a L4 capable, similar to Volkswagen's Artemis and Trinity products. But Neutron is not, besides this guy, interesting founder, other than that is just doing what other people are doing. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of other brands are like that as well. So,
but he's got the track record of being a successful entrepreneur, right? So
yeah, but also leaving companies, staying for not too long at companies.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But we'd heard about this company in stealth for behind the scenes, right? For a while, right? Like, so not a surprise that they came out of stealth. So, hey, can you tell us a brief history of BAIC, Daimler, Beijing Benz, and this 9.98% stake?
We have to go all the way back to 1983 when Beijing Jeep was founded.
Okay.
And then it became Beijing Benz Daimler Chrysler. And then it became Beijing Benz or BBAC. So they went through this several periods of changes in the name because the foreign partner went through that, merger and demerger and Chrysler.
A few of our listeners probably remember Daimler Chrysler, right?
Yeah. So, but basically, we only have to go back maybe to 2013 is when BAIC and Daimler, they sort of signed this kind of deal where the manufacturing joint venture, BAIC holds 51% stake.
Right.
Daimler, 49%. And then they also have this sales joint venture, Beijing Sales Service Company Limited, or BMBS.
No idea.
Where Daimler has the 51% stake and BAIC has the 49% stake. So that was kind of their understanding, putting Chinese majority owned in the manufacturing, but foreign majority owned in the sales joint venture. So that's how they've been operating since then. And then 2019, BAIC took a 5% stake in Daimler. And only until earlier this week, we've heard that Daimler announced that BAIC has actually increased that stake since 2019 to I think it's down 9.98%.
Right. Did they do that sneakily like Geely did, or did Daimler know all the whole time?
You know how I look at the press releases? I think it's highly coordinated. So Daimler announced it, and BAIC Group's official website announced it right at the same time. And this doesn't very happen often in Chinese companies. Chinese companies, their websites are always outdated, especially these state-owned big group companies. But this was different. So, right? And so basically keeping this a secret for 2 years, you're like, that can't happen. You're right. You're Daimler. You're a public listed company. So someone from within Daimler, he told me that the German capital market rules allowed BAIC to keep quiet about the extent of their holdings. So although they had a 5% stake, the disclosure thresholds between 5 and 10%, basically below 10%.
Below 10.
So BAIC was not obliged to disclose before this announcement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also it had to do with the recent spinoff of Daimler's truck unit, right?
Yep.
They're already independent listed. That means BAIC as a shareholder, they're going to get some shares for the Daimler truck holding as well. And maybe that was the time that, I don't know, that the spinoff and kind of led BAIC to inform about the size of the current stake. So that was what I heard from the Daimler representative. But it's an interesting development, and I can only think of one thing, which is this is kind of like a trade, kind of like a compromise, and with BAIC now becoming a even bigger shareholder, this, I think, will allow Daimler, when it becomes Mercedes-Benz AG next February, we can look forward to a share sale in a JV of BBAC, where it'll be turned into a Mercedes-Benz majority-owned venture, like BMW. What BMW is doing, they have a 75% stake in BBA, BMW Brilliance.
But that was more forced, right? Because Brilliance is in a lot of trouble.
Well, same for BAIC. Look at what has BAIC done. Their Chinese brands not going well. ArcFox is not going well. The only thing they've done well is the Photon commercial vehicle arm, which, by the way, has a joint venture with Daimler Truck, which will be producing Daimler Mercedes-Benz trucks locally next year.
Yeah, so commercial and passenger, they have a pretty close relationship.
Yeah, so I think BAIC, even though they've increased the stake, I feel like they're in a weak position when it comes to the JV side of it.
Okay.
Yeah. But then the other part of this is the whole geopolitical, being in a German big three, now you're owned by two Chinese companies.
Yeah.
That's a whole another topic that we don't have time to go into.
And they definitely wanted a higher stake, even if it's a few decimal point higher than Geely. I
think Geely is 9.69 through Li Shufu's holding.
Mm-hmm.
BAIC is 9.98%. So slightly higher.
And BAIC has a board seat, right?
That
I think they do.
am not sure.
I don't think Geely does.
But Daimler definitely has a board seat on the BAIC Motor, the Hong Kong listed company.
Right.
And remember, Daimler also has a stake in the BAIC BJEV unit. I think like 3.4% or something. So this is like a complicated relationship from all angles.
But Ola needs to lean into it because China is their most important market, or the largest market for sure.
Yeah.
And you could argue it's the most important.
3/4 of the sales are already locally produced. So EQA, EQB, EQE, EQC, 4 models locally produced, right?
Well, the EQE is going to start production
coming
next year, right?
Yeah. Next year, yeah.
So the EQS will still be exported, right?
I'll have a chance to test drive an EQE at a CES. Nice. Yeah, but I mean it's like an EQS except it's smaller. That's what I'm thinking.
It looks similar. I've not even seen it yet. So, but that's pretty cool. So, shall we move on to NIO?
Yeah. I guess NIO Day. What do you expect? I mean, we've seen the Twitter space. The NIO stands are getting all.
Well,
I'm getting a little bit excited as well because
it's at a 50,000 foot level. They have the Alan Walker, the DJ. So with the title "Hello World," this is their coming out party. Okay, number one. And I'm sure they're looking for a boost in share price. The share price of NIO has gone down.
Oh, this share price is just been weird. Like it's just don't tell me about it.
Yeah. So the share price has been down. Maybe there's the buy the dip. Maybe there's a lot of NIO stands out there that are buying on the dip. But I almost feel, because I don't know, I can't point to anything from a management standpoint or a sales standpoint that says, wow, they deserve this market cap shrink.
The president, Qin Li Hong, he talked about this. He said, the only thing he's a little bit worried is people who are investors and shareholders of NIO are getting kind of clobbered. That the capital market doesn't love what's going on in NIO. Even despite all of these, what they've been doing with the power swap stations, 730 now? Since we last talked, was just over 700 now.
But that's the thing, though, right? You and I talk about it, but outside of us, that gets a decent amount of Western listeners. The foreign media, unless they're covering NIO for China, they don't really bring that stuff up, right? So it's impressive for sure, and it should move the needle. But I think they're more concerned about kind of expansion externally or to foreign markets and all this other stuff, right?
No, still, I think this is still the after effect of the DD delisting. So it's still playing out.
But Xpeng hasn't dipped so well.
Xpeng, they've been on the up and right.
Yeah.
So they've done 10,000 consistently.
I actually think that it's as much about not having a ton of new news. The ET7, we've known about that for quite some time, and you can post spy shots and stuff like that of the ET5, but I think you got to be in the news. You got to be in making announcements, unfortunately, sometimes for no reason. So I think NIO seems to be pretty well managed. They're managing their international expansion, but when the title of NIO Day is Hello World, then there's obviously going to be some update on international expansion and what their strategy is going to be. Definitely going to be a car unveil, and sounds like they want to make this end of the year NIO Day pretty memorable for everybody who's going to tune in. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Hello World, this is issuing quite a few things. So Hello World meaning we're going more global, right? And Hello World meaning they're expanding their products kind of, right? They talked about the mass brand.
Yep.
So here's what I expect, what may happen. So ET5, that's a given. There's no doubt about that. And based on the tradition, they will only unveil or launch one model. So ES8, ES6, EC6, ET7 during the 4 previous NIO days.
Yep.
So ET5 this year. But I think they may give out a teaser for the third model under the NT 2.0 platform. Remember, William Li, he said that there will be 3 models next year from this platform, right? So we know ET5, ET7. So the other one, I've heard all sorts of names, ES7, whatever. But I think we may
let me ask
see
you this.
a teaser.
Let me ask you this. MPV, another SUV, sedan. What do you think?
Well, earlier the rumors pointed to an MPV.
Right.
But more recently, I've heard it might be another SUV slider between the 6 and the 8. And remember also, William Li, he said one of these 3 new models will be the lowest priced NIO. Could that be the ET5? Maybe.
I don't see an MPV, but
yeah. So, and another thing I expect to happen is some sort of announcement of more details, maybe on the new mass brand. So positioning, product plans, approximate delivery time. I think there will be a little bit more announcement on that side.
Do you think they'd share that on NIO Day? About a different brand? That seems strange to me.
This is purely my guess and my expectations.
Right.
It will not be in detail, but like a kind of a teaser and one more thing style. We should all also hear about an update on the 150 kilowatt hour hybrid solid state battery.
Sure.
Okay. And could we hear about product updates on the existing model? So remember, there's no refreshes, right? There's no like a midterm refresh of ES8 or ES6 or
Well,
EC6
for software, right?
Uh-huh.
There's OTAs, but there's not
But here's
mid-cycle enhancements they don't have.
here's what I'm looking forward to the most that could happen is the update on the NAD, so NIO autonomous driving.
Right.
And remember the ET7 when it was announced, they had all this hardware, or whatever the name for the platform. Could they be announcing something similar to the L3 for the Mercedes S class? This
in China?
yeah, based on the capabilities of NAD and what Xpeng has done with the NGP, City NGP, I expect NIO to come out with something to match it. Okay, to be more clear on the capabilities of this NAD. Okay.
I will, what's the right word? What I'm trying to say, I will follow along with that, because we have to remember this week I was on a call and the head of commercial sales at Sixt, which is the
German
Hertz.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I think his name is Vincenz.
They're working to put NIO robotaxis, right?
In Munich.
With Mobileye?
In Munich.
Right.
Next year. So this could play into what you just said, right?
Well, that's the robotaxi and the mobility part of it. But what I'm saying is for private sale.
Sure.
Right.
But it would be the same system, right?
It might not be L3 specifically, but something akin to the City NGP and more advanced driver assistance.
Right.
Other than that, I think just more announcements of newer markets in Europe.
Yeah.
Right. So that's about it, and we'll have to see.
Let me remind the listeners really quickly that Xpeng, Li Auto, NIO, the three companies that we track pretty closely, they are all expanding capacity. The current number of products, the current products that they have will not get them to filling that capacity. So each of them will need one or two more products, likely on the lower priced lower price scale, to get those 300,000 units. Because I think total capacity for NIO will be closer over 300,000 units in the next couple of years, right? There's NIO Park, and then there's another factory that they're building, right? And so if they want those factories humming at over 80-90% capacity utilization, then they need to get moving, because they're at 120,000 unit sales maybe this year. So, or 90,000, 90,000.
Yeah.
So look for lower price products we already seen it with the P5, right? For Xpeng. And so we got to get that volume going, especially because there's expectations now. They built capacity and they need to sell that capacity. So,
yeah. So, I mean, all three of them have multiple plants underway.
They weren't being conservative about that. That's for sure.
Right.
And
ET5 is supposed to be produced at the NIO Park, which is SOP in Q3 2022.
So it's and
ET7, probably they'll talk about more details on the exact time of delivery around the Chinese New Year time, that we can see some deliveries, and then everything else we'll just have to wait.
So we are at 10:52. You and I can keep talking because I wanted to get your opinion on a couple things that I heard. But if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you up. So, did you see Dan Amon is stepping down from Cruise
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah,
abruptly?
yeah.
So, I don't know what's going on with that, but that seems pretty.
I mean, at the investor day, he was really pumped, right? Talking about was it 100,000 units in like a few years
Yeah,
of Cruise robotaxis? Well, who knows? It's tough. And then look at what happened with Pony AI, right? They hit a pole or something, and then the license got taken away.
yeah.
And then Waymo in an accident today. So it's
I will say something about the Pony announcement. So Reuters said that the California DMV had taken their driverless testing away, license away, where the Chinese news site, the one that I saw, said that they voluntarily stopped testing the vehicle. I think Reuters is probably correct. But
I don't know. Whatever the case, we see how difficult putting a safe robotaxi out there is, right?
yeah,
Even with Waymo. But while the Waymo, I mean, they said the guy has been driving it manually, but still.
the level of scrutiny is going to be tremendous. And the other thing in the back of your head, in the back of your mind, Lay, is that it reminds you that Pony is testing autonomous vehicles in the US, right? So,
Yeah.
so they're a China-fornia company, like you said. Okay. Waymo, I didn't see about the Waymo, but did you see BMW doubling down and saying they have this China first strategy? I just saw
Yeah.
this
They had
morning.
this 20-minute press conference, online press conference about newer models next year. Five new models available. Three are locally produced. So
Everyone, and we had talked about this earlier this year, everyone is pulling in their product plan. What they thought they were going to launch 2 or 3 years from now, they're doing everything they can. And remember, when you pull in product plans, your manufacturing strategy changes, your sourcing strategy changes, your resource planning is completely different. So we're talking, these guys are moving mountains in order to pull in a vehicle that they thought they were going to actually launch in 2023, right? So
right, and then that battery electric 3 Series, that's going to be like a China only model.
yeah,
Because 3 Series is what kind of started the joint venture, the 3 and the 5. So maybe the 5 probably will be the next to be like a locally produced. They're calling it the flagship model.
but the thing is, Lay, if you've seen, you probably saw these, the iX and the iX3 and stuff. They're effectively ICEs, right?
Mhm.
There's not a lot of difference between. They're heavy, they're super expensive, and Chinese consumers are not convinced. And so BMW is probably a little bit like Volkswagen internally panicking a little bit, because to spend 90,000 US dollars on an iX3, an iX3 is really small on the inside, right? So
Yeah, so iX3, they're expecting 20,000 units this year.
yeah. Oh, because remember at the beginning of the year they launched it, and then I think less than a month later they took off 10,000 US dollars on it.
Mm-hmm.
So they mispriced it completely, and I think the iX is also really, really, really richly priced. So I think they're going to have to reconcile that, sharpen their pencil, because and I said this earlier, the number of competitors, the Hi-Fis, the Teslas, they're going to cap the pricing on these premium vehicles. You're not going to be able to sell for $30,000 more or 200,000 RMB more, because the Chinese consumer is just going to go to another brand. So that's where, but it's acknowledgement. We talked about this again. There's these things that we repeat constantly, right? And one of them is that the foreign automakers are finally acknowledging to the world that China dictates a lot of their product and brand and a company strategy, right? That's what BMW said this morning. Their China first strategy.
Yeah.
So
It's It's not like it's the first time it's China first. I mean, it's China first. Should have been China first for years.
Yeah, but politically in Germany, they couldn't say that, right? In the United States, they can't say that. But now that the EU, I think, is going to get to maybe 1.8 or 2 million units or something like that. I need to look sales. It's pretty significant. The Renault Zoe is doing well, but nowhere near China, right? And so now that China's leading the world by orders of magnitude in EV sales or NEV sales, I think it's important for them to acknowledge that, you know what, we're changing our strategy in Germany because of what's happening in China. We're changing our strategy in the United States because of what's happening in China. So and that was part of the challenge, right? I think now that they have acknowledged it, now it's time to execute. Now it's time to move. And you can't make mistakes now because the changes happen so fast here that a mistake being made, a wrong product, a wrong pricing, you're going to pay for it. You're going to get pounded in the market.
And in the case of Volkswagen, while you're trying to catch up in China, at the same time, you have to worry about your own transformation, right? how that goes. So, yeah.
And then in 2022, you got to worry about Tesla in your two most important markets building locally.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is awesome. This book should be written about this because the intrigue, the competition, the strategy, the psychology is just, it's going to be awesome, right? Like, anyways, so anything else that I don't have any other things that I wanted to.
The only other thing is to mention is this new IT box brand. Have you heard of it?
Yes. I don't know anything about it. The same day
that the Niutron was announced, that this other IT box, I haven't looked much into it, but supposedly a dedicated mobility kind of small van style robotaxi, or not robotaxi, but dedicated to ride hailing.
Yeah.
So, different players are trying to position themselves in different segments of this entire, mobility ecosystem, right? Trying to be relevant.
It's the amount of capital that's necessary to compete in the robotaxi space is still going to be pretty significant in China, although Deep Route has announced that they've allegedly democratized the robotaxi space by saying they have a $10,000 hardware software stack. But hopefully we'll find out more about that very soon, right, Lei? So that brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.